chit chat about birds while waiting for everybody else to join us, which many of you are here. Thank you so much for joining the informal, seemingly continuing series of Wilderness Youth Project chats about things from nature. We have special guests today. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves, but I'll just do the quick, here's what we're doing here, lay of the land. If you don't know about Wilderness Youth Project, you could guess what we do based on our name, Wilderness Youth Project. Or you could go to our website, wyp.org. You might also notice that these days, we're not just about kids. We are hoping to support everybody to connect with the natural world, especially now. One thing we say around the office, even though it's a virtual office, is that everybody knows nature makes all of us smarter, healthier, and happier. And I want to be those things during COVID. I'm guessing you do too. That's probably why you're here. Okay, participants, here's how this works. I know lots of you came to our last bird talk, so this is new for some and old hat for others. You have a chat feature in your Zoom window, and that is a great place to type your questions. You can type your questions to everybody in the room, not just the panelists, because that way if somebody else wants to jump in and answer, they are welcome to do so. I have looked to set this up so that Dan and Rebecca don't have to try to look at the screen and the chat and everything else all at once. So I'll convey your questions from the chat window and head your questions on over to Dan and or Rebecca. If it takes me a minute, it's just because there are lots of questions, so hang in there. And if there are questions we don't get to, we may or may not, no promises, try to follow up and answer your questions after the webinar is over. So
I followed up on several last time over email.
Excellent. All right, with that, I am going to ask Rebecca to introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm not officially a WIP WIP club member, but I am so happy to be joining today. I am by most of my hours of every day are spent as the volunteer manager at the Natural History Museum in Santa Barbara. But my real passion is teaching students about birding and getting into birds and how to understand how they connect you to sort of a greater picture of the wilderness. And so I'm really delighted to be here and just see where the conversation takes us.
Thank you.
Cool.
Dan.
My name is Dan Fontaine. I'm the Executive Director of the Wilderness Youth Project. I spend most of my time in front of this very computer right here, but I do get distracted by birds. Just before this meeting, within the hour, there was birds outside the window going meow, 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 meow. And I looked out across Hollister and I saw a couple of crows and a bunch of little birds around them, and I ran out the door, didn't even put my shoes on, ran across Hollister and looked up in the tree, and there one of the two crows had a little nestling in its claws, and starlings and mockingbirds were all around it complaining. So that was pretty exciting. Every once in a while, I get pulled away from the computer for emergency investigations.
For excellent reasons.
Feel free to ask Dan questions to follow up on that short story he just shared with us.
This morning around dawn, just right at dawn, I was walking my neighborhood and had a very similar experience. I never saw what was actually causing the ruckus, but crows just started pouring in from the neighboring streets and landing in a tree behind a house. Obviously, a similar thing was happening, except likely they were more alarming at a hawk or some other predator there. It seemed to be focused high in a tree, not focused down on the ground. So that's what I just presumed that it was a hawk they were yammering about.
Hawk or possibly an owl. Oh. Just this weekend I saw that crows were super upset, and I almost gave up trying to figure it out. And just as I started to walk away, a crow made a sound. And I turned again and looked back one more time, and it was swooping up. And I was like, oh, it must have just swooped down on the thing it was mad at. And I kind of extrapolated backwards the trajectory, and there was an adult great horned owl with two owlets perched right next to it on a branch.
Oh, nice.
Super cool.
Yeah, very nice. I live near the golf course, so I often have great horned owls that nest out on the golf course, and they cruise the neighborhood. And haven't heard
Which
of many.
golf course?
The Muni
Which
Golf,
golf course?
the city. Yeah.
As you
There's a
might,
great horned owl. There's a great horned owl nest on Sandpiper Golf Course too.
Mm.
Maybe they like golf courses.
Yeah, lots of nice prey roaming around on the open areas.
We got some questions, Michelle?
since you're talking about owls and hawks, let's go with the hawk question. So here's one. I have a red-shouldered hawk that flies overhead every day. I hear the hawk call. Why is the hawk sounding? I perceive the hawk as hunting. However, I don't understand why a predator would want to announce itself. Looks like Rebecca's nodding. I'm going to hand that one to you.
That's a question I have asked myself many, many times. Red-shouldered hawk is, I think, in my experience, our very most vocal hawk. Occasionally you will hear things from red tails or Cooper's hawks or other really common hawks, but red shoulder is almost unable to move around or to move through its habitat without vocalizing. Of course it does, but I have wondered the very same thing. Like in my experience, likely that's more about communicating to either another hawk that it's where it is, it's doing, where it's moving, or to warn other hawks or other birds that this is its territory, this is its place. What are your thoughts on that, Dan?
I totally agree with all that, and I would just add a finer point on they're definitely, lower on the food chain than red-tailed hawks. So they definitely alarm for red-tailed hawks too, which are also all over the place. And I think they'll be mouthy to crows too, even though crows aren't going to take them. But they, if they weren't mouthy to crows could maybe take a nestling or something like that. I don't know, but they vocalize a lot for sure, and they definitely vocalize a lot if they see a red-tailed hawk anywhere.
Do you want to make the vocalization, Dan?
Keer, 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 keer. It's pretty loud and it goes on.
And sometimes when they're circling really high, and you can still really hear that well, and two or sometimes more will circle together and call together. It's a really cool thing to see, especially when they're soaring like that.
Since
if
I'm
somebody's seeing it every day and hearing it vocalize a lot, they probably have a red-shouldered hawk nest with nearby, and red-shouldered hawk nests probably have nestlings in them right now, would be my guess.
Yeah, I think so.
Ooh, where nearby would one look if you wanted to find that nest?
They're not as visible as red-tailed hawk nests, which are really big and kind of easy to spot, but they're also not so small that you can't see them if you don't look. The only one I know about right now is in Tucker's Grove Park in a sycamore. It's pretty high up, but it's a pretty big nest, so you can still see it.
They're about they're about the same size.
They're in eucalyptus.
Crow nests. There is one I just recently saw at along San Jose Creek, around University, Merida. That there's an open space there, also in a sycamore, and pretty high. There's a pair attending a nest there.
Okay, we just got
I bet they're in eucalyptus trees too.
One of my favorite questions that people, well, I won't say people ask this, I think I ask this question every year, which is, are there more red-shouldered hawks here than there used to be? I think they're everywhere this year.
Perception is a funny thing. I haven't noticed that there are more than usual. I think, this has been said over and over in the last 2 months, but I think because people are maybe in one place more often than they normally are, or for longer periods, and paying attention a little bit differently, especially those of you who obviously you're interested, I think we're noticing a little bit differently and tuning in a little more closely. That's my take on it.
There's only a few species of birds that I think actually change dramatically in terms of population. Like there's some nomadic species, like maybe pine siskins or some mountainous it like the mountains that forage and deplete an area, and then they all move to a different area. But most birds, the population doesn't vary that much. I think it doesn't vary as much as people's awareness does, which is what Rebecca's saying. I think people's awareness varies more than the bird numbers do for most species.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about vocalizations, or that's how we got into this red-shouldered hawk topic, you talked about how sort of noisy the red-shouldered hawk is. Could you just spend a second and start with you, Rebecca, about separate from hawks, maybe thinking about smaller birds? Why do birds cheep? Why do birds make these noises they make?
Oh, so many reasons. And one of the greatest things about all the reasons is that there's a relatively recent research on something that we always thought to be true, which was that only the males are singing to proclaim territory, to attract mates, and all of that. There's a lot of brand new research out about how many species where the female actually does a lot of singing too, which I find really fascinating, and for various reasons. But there are sort of a few basic reasons. One is song, which is about breeding and is about territory and settling the disputes among birds that might be competing for territory. Another one is literally contact with each other, just kind of call notes, soft call notes, telling each other where they are, especially small birds that would be in a flock. Bush tits are a great example. They're in constant conversation with each other about moving through a canopy or moving through the shrubs. Alarm is another great reason that birds call. We just talked about that. It's literally ringing the bell and saying, hey, pay attention, there's something going on here. Other things, Dan, that you're...
This time of year, it's a little bit quieter, but it is distinctive, and there is a lot of it, which is begging. You hear begging calls from birds that are still either from the nest or out of the nest, but still being cared for by the parents out of the nest. I've been biking to work a lot because I don't have to drive around for meetings or dropping my daughter off at school. And from my bike, just every bike ride home, I hear multiple instances of begging birds.
Rebecca, this might be a good moment for you to plug your May 20th talk. Do you want to do that? Oh, we might have gotten Rebecca.
If any,
yeah, go ahead.
And we're still sorting out the time, but I think it's probably going to be, was I cut off there? Sorry. At 7 o'clock, we are doing a virtual dawn chorus at the Botanic Garden. So none of us will be there except the camera that's mounted facing the meadow, and we will do a listening activity. We'll also be talking I'll also be talking a little bit about what we're hearing and using the chat feature on the Zoom meeting. And so it will be a very different experience. I'm going to try to not yammer on too much about what we're hearing, but really to encourage people to deeply listen as well as we can with this technology we have and not being there. See what we hear. And if you've never heard the term dawn, it happens every day, no matter where you are. And if you are a morning person, it's one of the joys of getting up very early and getting out into the world and listening. It's a really special time to be out.
And I'm just popping the Dawn Chorus link into the chat window in case folks want to join Rebecca for that on May 20th. Thank you for that. I feel like while we're talking about what birds are saying to each other, why birds vocalize, the many different ways and reasons they do that, that could lend to a graceful segue to talking a bit about habitat, because I see that there are some questions, and these questions I think were spurred by the hawk conversation around, can you talk a little bit about, and we can stick with red-shouldered hawk because why not, but feel free to tangent off red-shoulder. Where do hawks live, and do wildfires affect the distribution of prey and predator birds? Let's see, Dan, you want to start this and then Rebecca can fill in?
Sure. There's a couple different topics in there. I would say, the south coast of Santa Barbara is very birdy. It's a Mediterranean climate, which is really productive and has a lot of life and just a lot of wildlife and biodiversity. On top of that, all of suburbia is irrigated, and when a place is in a dry climate is irrigated, it's really a magnet for a lot of any kind of wildlife that can tolerate humans. So I think red-shouldered hawks are pretty well suited to suburbia. I've definitely seen them hunt for mice and rats right in my backyard. I just have a postage stamp backyard in the middle of suburbia. But they particularly, I think all the hawks and a lot of birds and wildlife love edges. If there's like the edge of Lake Los Carneros and a neighborhood, or the edge of Elwood Mesa and neighborhood, or the edge of San Marcos foothills and a neighborhood, because then they can kind of get the best of both worlds and use two different habitats for the things they need. So red-shouldered hawks are pretty not just tolerant of human settled land, but seem to do pretty well in it, because there's a lot of prey for them to eat in and about it. Wildfires, I don't really have anything smart to say about wildfires. They must have dramatic impacts on wildlife, but I don't know what I have clever or insightful to say about it.
I can offer just a little story about an observation after the Jesucita fire. I have done botanic garden walks monthly for several years, and after the Jesus fire, we started to see species that we had never seen from the garden. We started to see a huge number of white-tailed kite, because the landscape had been just stripped of all the big shrubs, and now the white-tailed kites and small became much more exposed. See harrier that we started to see in an odd location because the landscape had been completely changed by the fire. We also just saw it this last, when was that? The fire that came down onto the San Marcos foothills. I can't remember its name, but we had, right following that fire, we had 3 short-eared owls, a burrowing owl, and then increased numbers of white-tailed kite and northern harrier there on that landscape after the fire, right after the fire. So yes, certainly it does affect prey availability, and as it goes on, for nesting suitability, red shoulder might not find a suitable nest site in a place that has had everything, all the taller trees taken down by fire.
One funny fire story I have that involves a hypothesis that I don't know if I confirmed, but I used to live on Old San Marcos Road, and I forget which fire it was, but there was a fire that came really close, and we were evacuated. And before we were evacuated, I remember looking at the edge of the fire with my binoculars, and there was a big flock of cliff swallows all flying around the edge of the fire. And my hypothesis was that, just insects were being driven out of the away from the fire and right into the bills of cliff swallows. Yeah. I don't know if that's true, but if it's true, boy, it's tough to be an invertebrate. It's good to have a backbone in this life.
Actually, I just read that story recently about the fires in Australia, and all these predatory animals were wringing the edges as the fire moved to prey on the insects and animals that were forced out.
Yeah. Wow. I want to use your swallows to segue from these charismatic bigger birds to some smaller birds, but I have to ask one more big bird question. Inquiring minds want to know if hawks have predators. So, Rebecca, let's hear it.
Other hawks, same species, different species. And of course, humans are the sort of worst offenders of preying on predators, preying on hawks. But yes, great horned owls will chase down and take out any other major predator that's in its territory when it's on a territory. For many years, the only long-eared owl I ever saw in Santa Barbara County was one that had been killed by a great horned owl on Vandenberg Air Force Base. Fortunately, I've seen a live one since then in the county, but yeah, other birds are big predators of hawks.
Yeah, not so much on the south coast, but in the valley, eagles would be predators of hawks because they're even bigger. I don't know that bald eagles or golden eagles have avian predators. I don't think so, but yeah, red-tailed hawks are not the tip top of the food chain. They're near the top, but not at the top.
Okay, so to take that segue back to some smaller birds, I am glad somebody, I think maybe we're not supposed to have favorites, but somebody asked a question about a personal favorite of mine. In fact, 6-year-old Luca, who apparently has taken birding classes already with Rebecca, is here and wants to know about the cedar waxwings that seem to be in the area. What are they doing here? How long will they be here? So Rebecca, why don't you lead off with that one? Oh, but if Rebecca freezes, Dan, you could take cedar wax.
Well, hi, Luca. Good. Well, they're a favorite of mine too. I don't know if they're, you can't choose favorites, but at this time of year, yes, they're one of the last species to leave to go north to breed. And you still see little tiny groups of waxwings moving around when you're out birding now, but they will definitely be gone in the next week or so to go way up to the North, Canada mostly, and northern North America to breed. They're feeding, they're foraging on berries in particular, all kinds of fruits, but mostly berries. They're just some of the most amazingly social. They're really fun to watch socially. They have a lot of communication with each other and always in constant contact with each other. Their vocalization is really, really high, and some people can't even hear it. It's so high, but it's they're a favorite of many, I think, mainly because of how they look. To me, they look like they don't actually have feathers. They look painted, like they're China painting or something, painted. But they're amazing. And so appreciate every sighting you have of them in the next week or so, because they'll be gone until fall.
Dan, you want to add anything about cedar waxwings?
I just fact-checked what Rebecca was saying, and it's true in Paul Lehman's book, Birds of Santa Barbara County. Most birds that leave for the summer leave in April, but they leave more in May. There are some June records in Lehman, according to Lehman, but most of them leave in May. Yeah, I think they're, forgive me if Rebecca said this while I was reading, but they're more strictly frugivorous or fruit eating than other birds, which is, I think, part of the reason for their timing. They need to wait for berries in Alaska to be ripe to go up there to breed, whereas a lot of other birds are hunting insects and feeding them to their young. Cedar waxwings are really eating a lot of berries. They're really, what do they like? They like toyon, and they like pepper trees, and they like pyracantha and
Cotoneaster. Yeah.
Anything with a berry they love.
Here's a tip: if you ever see cedar waxwings in a sycamore over a parking lot, don't park there. Your car will soon be covered with purple droppings all over. Yeah, this happens a lot at the museum. We learned this right away.
The useful knowledge from paying attention to the birds. Well, I find the cedar waxwing fairly charismatic and distinguishable. Rebecca, you were talking about just how dramatic they look, like they're painted and with that tufty head. Even for me as a novice person who looks at birds, I feel pretty confident when I see a cedar waxwing that I can identify it and recognize it, which is nice. What about, now I'm going to roll out some really technical terms, I want to talk about LGBs and LBBs. So little gray birds and little brown birds. What do we do if we see lots of little gray birds or lots of little brown birds and they kind of all look the same to us and we're not ready to commit to going online and taking a Cornell course, but do have curiosity about how to learn a little more about recognizing some little gray birds or little brown birds? What do you think, Rebecca? What do we do?
One of the nice things about some of the LBBs, little brown birds, is that they're often in flocks and they're often on the ground. And you can take a few minutes to really just slow down and start deeply looking at them. What is it that you notice about them? The very first thing you always want to notice about any little unidentified bird you're looking at is, what is its bill shape? Well, first of all, what's it doing? Where is it in the world? Is it in the air? Is it on the ground? Is it in trees? Whatever. What's it doing? And then what's its bill shape? Is it a conical bill, like a triangle, or is it really sharp and pointy? And is there anything about it that you really notice more than anything? Does it have strong white wing bars, or does it have stripes on the head like White-Crowned Sparrow? Or, those are things that you want to take as much detail in as you can, including, does it sound like anything else or is it making noise at all? Those are just things that I would recommend when you've got a flock of LBBs in front of you and you go into a panic, which you do when you're somewhere where you don't know the LBBs in that area.
What else, Dan?
I would just say I would underscore the pausing. I would pause and I would try to just not worry, not beat yourself up about being able to identify it or not. And I think there's a huge value in routine, meaning like if you're out on the trail and you see a little brown bird, and then you're at the beach and you see a little brown bird, and then you're at your backyard and you see a little brown bird, it's like, who knows what all these little brown birds are. But if you pause, it's easiest to have a routine in your backyard. I would focus on either your yard or some place that you go most every day, and focus on those little brown birds, and have repeated sightings. Like, oh, I was here the day before yesterday. I saw that same bird. I don't know what it is, but that's the same bird. You don't have that experience if you're looking at birds all over the place. But if you're at the same place repeatedly and you pause and look at the birds, then you start to be able to distinguish one little brown bird from a different one. And it's when you get that familiarity that it becomes a lot easier to identify it. So if you want to put names on birds and little brown birds are a mystery to you, focus on a routine and try to see them several times a week, and then you just add some of those little details that Rebecca was mentioning each time you get to see it. Like, oh, today I'm noticing that it has that bill, and oh, now I notice it's got this stripe on its head, or now I notice that it's different than this other bird that's got a stripe on its wing. And as you add those together via a routine, then your question will be answered.
And come up with a technique that works for you to try to remember all that stuff that you're seeing. Whether you're making a little voice recording in your phone, or you're making notes, you have a little notebook or whatever, telling somebody else so they can help you when you get home. Those are all great strategies to remember, because here's what you shouldn't do. You shouldn't panic about how many there are. You should do as Dan is saying, become familiar with some places and some routines. And I bet that you're seeing more than you think you might be. And you can go, oh, that's it. That's it. That's those black and white stripes on the head. It's nothing else but a White-Crowned Sparrow, who also just left for the summer, by the way. So that makes me sad, but they'll be back.
I'm going to excerpt that portion of this recording, Rebecca, the holding up the field guide. Don't get overwhelmed. I needed to hear that. I always need to hear that. Along those lines, do you each want to just throw out 3 candidate little brown birds that those of us in Santa Barbara and Goleta are going to see in the next week?
Yeah, I could lead off. I mean, I think Toweys are super into suburbia and very tolerant of people. California Toweys, again, around houses a lot. The birds with house in the name, like house finches and house sparrows. A lot of house finches and house sparrows. Those would be my 3: house finches, house sparrows, and California Toweys.
Yeah. Those would be my 3 too. Many of the sparrows that winter here, white-crowned sparrow, chipping sparrow, golden-crowned sparrow, they are largely moving out and are mostly gone now, and so we're not seeing them in our yards and on our outings. But the LBBs that we are still seeing really regularly are house finch, California towey. I think California towey's got to be one of the coolest birds for learning LBBs, because it's really big, and big for a small sparrow type bird. Sexy, it makes a lot of great noise. It's really, it has a lot of personality. You can observe it doing a lot of different things, and it's a great launching point to get you start to understanding, like, oh, look at that little bit of cinnamon color right here, right below the bill. I never noticed that. And right under the tail, those are great ID points for California towey. They're subtle. They're not kind of in your face field marks, but they're there. So it's a great jumping off point for LBBs for sure.
The California towey for sure for me is a close neighbor. I see these birds on the ground. They're the birds that tend to look like they're flirting with themselves in my car's rear view mirrors. I feel like I could see a towey anywhere at any time of day these days.
We have a joke around the house. It's like, oh, it's the season of towey spit on the car mirrors, because we go out to the car and the side mirrors are covered with towey spit. They get in there and they attack their reflection in the car mirror. There's just all stuff on the mirror.
So let's talk a little bit more about those house finches. We do have a house finch question coming in here. We have a lot of house finches nesting in our overhangs. We love them. We want to know, how long do they live and where do they go when they aren't here?
House finch is always here. House finch is what we call a resident. Meaning it breeds here in our area, it winters here during the non-breeding season. It's always present. It might be doing different things, but it's definitely always present. One of the nice things about becoming familiar with it is that it is always around. It's not seasonal. It changes its habits a little bit seasonally, but it's always nearby.
Yeah, it might not be in your house, at your house eaves outside of the breeding season, but it's probably within a couple houses of your house when it's not when it doesn't have a nest in the eaves of your house. It's probably within 100 yards of your house.
It's also one of the cool things that I've noticed with house finch. I'm always surprised when I'm out in what I kind of perceive to be a wilder area, so Figueroa Mountain or whatever. Often house finch is readily visible and abundant. It seems odd to me that this bird that is so adapted to living around humans is also well adapted to living in various kinds of habitat, which makes it so successful for sure.
Which is probably not true of the house sparrow. The house sparrow I don't see away from houses, but yeah, the house finch is everywhere.
And what about the song sparrow? So you talked about the house sparrow, and I'm seeing a commenter mention that they're still seeing song sparrows around. Would that be another little brown bird we might see and hear? Dan?
It's definitely, yeah, a candidate for the top 3, especially if you can cue into its song. It's usually a 3-part song, and it starts with a whistle. It's like like that. And again, it's about a half-hour bike ride from my office to my home, and I probably hear that song 15 times on that bike ride, because they especially like to sing now in the breeding season, and they're super common. They don't generally nest within the structure of a person's house. They nest in bushes. If you find yourself out on an open space on the south coast here, they probably really like coyote brush for nesting, just any kind of bushy, brushy habitat. And they're definitely up there with the most common, little brown birds, down to the ground. And the more you, I think, well, I'll make an I statement. The more I listen to that song, the more I love it. Just makes me happy the more I hear it. What do you want to add about the song sparrow, Rebecca?
I was just going to say, yes, they also are a resident. So they breed and winter here. And when I'm teaching classes, I'm always amazed how many song sparrows we might record, say, at UCSB Lagoon. And so every single time I go there, I go back to one of the great resources that I use is the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Used to be called Birds of America subscription service. Now it's Birds of the World. To read about how big their territories are, because it seems like there's this song sparrow like every 10 yards, and they are really small territories. And so I have to go back and remind myself every year that yes, they have small territories and they sing abundantly, and it's just one of the great pleasures of having a year-round sparrow song here. It's a great species to study.
Speaking of song, Dan, can I put you on the spot and ask you to do that song sparrow again? Because that was so good.
It's not exactly like this, of course, but this is like the spirit of it. The spirit of it is 3 parts. It's a 3-part song, and it starts with whistles. So it's...
Yeah.
Something... There's lots of variation, but usually 3 parts, and usually starts with some clear whistles.
Mm-hmm. And for a little compare and contrast, do you have your own version of house sparrow and white-crowned sparrow?
Well, like Rebecca said, white-crowned sparrows are gone, but they're usually a 2-part song and usually a long plaintive whistle at the beginning. It's like, it's just sort of a, ish. And I don't know, house sparrows don't have much of a, I'm sure they have something that functions as a song, but it doesn't sound as song-like as other sparrows' birds. It's not as melodic as other sparrow songs. I think it's a different family too, right? All the house sparrows from a different continent originally. All the true sparrows are in this family called Emberizidae, and the house sparrow, it's got the name sparrow, but it's in a different family, and it's less related to the other birds that we call sparrows.
Yeah, is it a weaver finch? One of the weaver families. Yeah, it's
something like that, or old world, something or other.
It's not my favorite sound because living by the golf course, I have some great bird experiences, but I also have a lot of the non-native species that are really abundant, like house sparrow and Eurasian collared dove, which are singing nonstop right now. So often I can't hear other birds because of them, but yeah, it's now see, Dan's description of white-crowned sparrow is not as glowing as I would give it. I absolutely love white-crowned sparrow song. I have it as a ringtone. Yeah, because it's just one of my favorite sounds in the fall. That's to me the signal that the winter is coming, which is my favorite season, the fall season. When the white crowns arrive and start singing in the yard, it's a great song.
Hey Rebecca, I think I can actually play White-Crowned for you. Let's try this. Let's see if we can get fancy and play the White-Crowned Sparrow for everybody here. Going over to White-Crowned Sparrow. Only if I get to listen. Oh,
Got to make sure you get the right one.
yeah, exactly. That would
On the left.
All right, we'll come back to that.
I can make mine.
Okay, let's hear your version. That's way better.
Oh, no, I can't make it. Are you kidding? I've been actually studying, trying to figure out how to.
Kind of faint.
Yeah, it was super quiet.
Louder, bird. Oh. You turn up your volume. Oh. That's so my experience of trying to watch and listen to birds. That's perfect.
The cool thing about White-Crowned is we get to see 3 subspecies here in Santa Barbara, and talk about getting overwhelmed by that whole page of LBBs. Start drilling down into subspecies of some of the abundant species, and then I start to panic. But we do see 3 subspecies, and they all have different songs, which is really cool. And it's one way to sort them out. So their songs are just slightly different. There's a resident species that does not migrate, that starts occurring up in Lompoc area. And then there are 2 migratory species that winter here. And they have different songs. So it's really a fun way to, if you're into this stuff, it's a really fun way to spend some time working out the different subspecies.
Okay, in the interest of having just 17 minutes left, I'm going to pepper you to make sure that we catch up a bit on the people's questions that we have here. Dan, you've looked at 2 books during this time. Would you mind grabbing those books again, showing us what they are, and telling us the title and author?
Oh, sure. This is the first edition of Sibley for North America, Sibley Guide to Birds, David Allen Sibley. I have the newer edition too, but I think that copy is at my house. This book is out of print. This has no pictures. It's all text. I mean, there's a couple black and white illustrations, but this is written by a guy when he was a student, I think a graduate student at UCSB, Paul Lehman. He went on to become probably the most prominent avian geographer. I think everybody that makes a field guide uses him now to make the distribution maps, the maps that say where that bird exists. He's pretty accomplished in the bird world. You can get this online. You can get a PDF of this online.
And he updates it usually twice a year.
He updates it twice a year still, so it's actually you can't hold a paper copy in your hand unless you print it yourself, but you get this living document, in a sense, that gets updated. It's called Birds of Santa Barbara County by Paul Lehman. Lehman is Lehman.
I can send you the link to the online location where you can download the PDF.
Yeah, probably the most useful information in it to most people is when the bird arrives and when it leaves, and in the county, so it's very local. And then the other kind of cool thing, if I can find the map, he divides the county into 5. Let's see if I can come up here. To 5 districts. There's a South Coast district and a mountainous district and a Coyama Valley district, and he says where what. For each bird, it says what districts of the county that bird is in. So it's very, if you're wondering, like, should that bird be here? It's very good for that kind of information, local information.
And I'll just add that most birders and naturalists in Santa Barbara County really regularly refer to it as a way to up their game on status and distribution of species they might not be familiar with. I have a terrible problem getting seasick, so I don't do a lot of pelagic birding on the water, and I know absolutely nothing about the status and distribution of most pelagic birds, and so I'm constantly going into Lehman to kind of help learn about some of those birds that I don't see regularly, because I couldn't tell you where exactly they breed or when do they leave or whatnot.
Speaking of birds, oh yeah, go
if
ahead.
a bird's unusual, like how unusual is it? He'll specifically say, there are 3 records of this bird in the county, or, it's just very detailed. Go ahead, Michelle.
Speaking of birds that I haven't seen a lot, but I get really excited when I do, it sounds like Luca recently got to see a phainopepla and wants to know how long will phainopepla be around. Dan, I was with you when I first saw one, so I'll give you this question.
Well, I should refer to Lehman. They're in the county year-round for sure. I think in the winter they come more towards the coast, but it can be sporadic. I've lived in Elwood for 8 years, and maybe 2 of those winters, I would see a phainopepla most days around my house, and then the other 6 years, I would never see a phainopepla. So they get more common as you go into the foothills, and definitely more common in the St. Ynez Valley. They are super cool birds. They're right up there with waxwings in terms of having charismatic looks and behaviors. Did I get that right on the distribution, Rebecca, would you say? Or
yeah, and it actually is way more complicated that nobody really talks about it, but this is another good reason to have that Cornell subscription, as you can drill in to these layers. But they have actually a secondary breeding season where they disperse from the desert, which is where they're common, the California and Arizona deserts. They disperse out to coastal California and breed again, and it's still kind of being looked at, and how often does it happen, and all that kind of research I find really interesting. But yeah, Dan's right. One of the places you can see them right now, Farron Road. Take a walk up Farron Road, and you go up by the reservoir, and they're calling. They have a great call, that whoop, whoop call.
Barbara, I've never tried this before. I think I just allowed Barbara to talk because she raised her hand. Do you have a phainopepla question? Barbara, did I allow you to talk? Did I do that? Okay, maybe not. I've never had someone raise their hand. Well, I tried it. I'll try it again.
I raised my hand by accident.
Oh,
so sorry.
It's so nice to hear your voice anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. I was so excited by the phainopepla. I think I pushed something. So I'm sorry.
It happens to the best of us. Thank y'all for bearing with us as we learn how to do webinars over here. Okay, I'm going to keep moving with this set of questions. Let me pull up. Oh, I think I relate to this question. We have a spotted towey who sits in the window by my husband's desk, pecks at the window, and sings hour after hour. Is the window like a mirror? And does the bird think there's a really handsome spotted towey in the mirror? I've had this happen with a California towey. I'd be excited if I had it happen with a spotted towey. What do you think, Rebecca?
Absolutely. Yep, just like a mirror. And depending on the situation, how the sun hit or how the light hits the window, probably sometimes of day it's more reflective than others. And yeah, he's definitely all about, hey, my territory. Who is that other equally gorgeous spotted towey there? I need to proclaim that this is my zone. I've heard it happen. I've never seen it happen, but I've heard that it regularly happens with roadrunners, where roadrunners are abundant. And that's like a big dinosaur coming to your window and tapping and saying, hey, what's that? Yeah, a lot of birds do it.
Like a dinosaur. Here's another one. I'll give you this one, Dan. It seems like the scrub jays scare away the little phoebes and finches in my yard. Is that true?
Scare them away. Well, I think phoebes and finches are smaller than scrub jays, so they probably, general rule of thumb in the world, that you're scared of things bigger than you, with some exceptions. But so I would expect the littler birds to give the scrub jays some space. They are a bigger bird, and they are, I think, as somebody might have mentioned earlier, Rebecca might have mentioned, or maybe it was before the call, Scrub jays are infamous for being nest robbers. They will take eggs and nestlings out of other birds' nests. So a lot of little birds are afraid of scrub jays. A scrub jay actively moving something away, that could happen if the scrub jay had a nest. Every bird is really sensitive around its nest, so if a scrub jay had a nest nearby, I could see it, chasing anything that came close, even if it was a smaller bird.
Yeah, totally agree. We have some really vocal scrub jays in the neighborhood, and I have to sort of have a conversation with my husband, who loves to give them peanuts now and then, unsalted in the shell peanuts. And you can actually establish such dominant scrub jays that some of your other nesting small birds might be impacted by that, because of course they're going to go prey on what they normally prey on, which is nestlings and eggs and whatever. And there is some thought that it's possible that you could affect your neighborhood by feeding your scrub jays.
Well, there's a follow-up question, actually. Rachel here has an experience which I share. She says, an adult scrub jay approaches me when I go to fill my bird feeder, and it makes begging movements and sounds like a juvenile. Have you ever seen this?
No, not with acting as a juvenile. That's interesting.
Yeah, I could imagine a scrub jay that got used to like a neighbor feeding it, going to another neighbor's feeder and saying like, "You're going to feed me too, right?"
Right.
That would be an adult, but that would definitely be more unusual if it was a juvenile scrub jay begging from a person.
If you have a lot of scrub jays in your yard and they're comfortable around you, one thing to listen for, they have a really awesome whisper song. If you're very quiet and they're near you, you can hear them doing this whisper song, and it's kind of a mimicry of other species, like a mockingbird might, but it always feels like such a gift to hear that. It's a really, really great thing to pay attention for.
The Scrub Jay Whisper Song. That might be the title for our next webinar. Okay, another related question. We have a crow's nest nearby. We've been watching them protect the nest. We live on a hillside and have noticed that they will see a bird a long way off and take off to chase it away and keep it away. What is their range as far as territory, i.e., how close will another nest be?
I don't know. Again, that's a great question for the Cornell site. Do you have a crow nest in your neighborhood, Dan, that you know of?
Yeah, I have a couple actually. They can definitely be within a few houses of each other in Elwood. Those questions about ranges are always so hard to answer because they're so variable. Like, and what crows in particular will chase away can vary a lot too. For example, right across the street from my house, there's a palm tree with a crow nest in it, and then right behind that, there's like a bush with a mockingbird nest in it. And every day this week, the mockingbird is alarming through the crow's territory towards a tall Araucaria, not the Norfolk Island pine, but the other one, like the coral reef pine, the one that kind of leans a little bit to the southeast. And every day, the Cooper's hawk that has a nest on the other side of Hollister and some eucalyptus trees flies out to that Araucaria and perches in that tree. And the mockingbird will alarm for it, but the crow is just like, you're far enough away. As long as you stay over there in that tree, I'm going to let you be there. But if you come any closer, I'm going to get you. But different crows have different sensitivities, and then of course the same crow has different sensitivities to different birds. Crows will definitely fly far out of their way to harass a red-tailed hawk. I mean, they hate red-tailed hawks year-round and will go way out of their way, especially if another crow's already mobbing it. They're like, oh, I'm going to go join that other crow and mob this red-tailed hawk. So it's a tough question to answer because there's just so much variability in how close birds will nest together and how closely they'll tolerate various species.
Here's a little more detail. It turns out this nest is near a Cooper's nest, and they are constantly chasing off red-tailed hawks and turkey vultures, and it sounds like this crow will take off many football fields away, chasing off other birds, way far.
Yeah, I definitely believe that for red-tailed hawks. I wouldn't think the list of birds would be too long that they would fly multiple football fields for, but for sure, red-shouldered hawks and red-tailed hawks and maybe Cooper's hawks. Where is this? I'm curious where this Cooper's hawk nest is.
Okay, we'll get some intel. Geographically, where is this crow nest? Shepherd Mesa, Carpinteria.
Shepherd Mesa, Carpinteria. That's cool. Sounds like a great opportunity to observe bird behavior.
Yeah.
And one of the great things about the crows is that they don't just sort of arrive because they can feel a disturbance in the forest. They have a very distinctive call to call in reinforcements. And when you start, I'm a big crow lover, even though most people aren't that into them, but I love them. And one of the reasons I love them is they have these really distinct vocalizations for different alarms.
Do you want to do any of those, Dan? Want to close us out with some vocalizations, and then we can go to final words?
The one thing in general I would say about crows that I think is a little bit useful, without getting into specific vocalizations because there's such a range and a spectrum of crow calls, I like to think of crow caws on the spectrum from short, fast, and high, like to long, slow, and low. Long, slow, and low is more upset. This is a crow. The more longer, slower, and lower the caw is, the more upset that crow is. And the more it's short, fast, and high, it's just kind of an announcement like, oh, I saw a red-tailed hawk take off way over there, look, or hey, spouse, I'm over here right now, or oh, hey, I saw you take off and fly over there, spouse. It's sort of a short, fast, and high is kind of an announcement, and long, slow, and low is upset.
Yeah.
Versus and when they get into the long, slow, and low, there's body language. There's like flicking their tail out and hunching over.
Yeah.
That's an upset crow.
I love that. I love that. And I love the description of length, and that's not something I think I would have picked up on. But when you do those two calls, I can actually get a feel for having heard each of those types of calls, and it connects with maybe not an emotion, but an announcement or a pressure of some kind. Yeah. So cool.
Speaking of feelings, I'm going to slide one last question in here. Do crows mate for life?
Ooh, the worst question of all.
I think crows are a lot like people. I think they ideally mate for life, but not always.
Yeah. I would say that anytime anybody describes a bird to you as mating for life, there's so much human overlay on that phrase. Yes, there are species that are monogamous, but many of those at one time, during a breeding season. And there are species that will reconnect during the breeding season after having been apart in the winter. But there are always, like Dan said, there are always sort of extra pair bonds and things that are formed. And so it's a tricky question.
Okay, we're going to close because it's 1 o'clock. You each have a chance to give a bird benediction. You gave us a lot of wise words about avoiding overwhelm and slowing down and going to a place like our own backyard or a place we go often. Any final bird benedictions, well wishes for those of us who want to go listen to the birds and look at the birds? Dan, you first so that Rebecca can be the last word.
Yeah, I was looking for something. Anyway, I'll just do one from memory rather than something I saw recently. Barry Lopez said this. He's a natural history writer. He said, I felt a calmness birds can bring, and I sensed here the outlines of the oldest mysteries, the falling of light from the heavens, the nature and extent of space, the pooling of time in the present as if it were water. I might have botched that a little bit, but I love the spirit of those words, which is how it opens. I felt a calmness birds can bring to people. If you're trying to, don't get too caught up in learning, soak up the calmness too. Soak up the don't get too caught up in identifying everything and understanding everything. Just remember, don't forget the calmness that birds can bring to us. I'll pass it over to Rebecca.
I love that. It's hard to follow that, but
I know, sorry, Rebecca.
I would say that use that very thing, whatever is evoked for you by being in the presence of birds and really stopping. Just, you know, right now it's hard to find joy everywhere you might usually find joy, and that for me is where I get it most. And to stop and pay attention and to let whatever comes up for you happen is that door being thrown open wide and for you, inviting you in. And it's just I think it's a perfect way into being aware of nature in a deeper way. And I would encourage you to do it whenever you can.
I'm popping back on the screen just to say thank you, Rebecca and Dan, for allowing us to ask you anything about birds. And thank you to all of our participants and your great questions and our time out of time, our hour of getting to think about nothing but what's happening in the bird world. You are all on our list now, so you'll hear as we evolve more Nature Connection webinars to sustain us through this time. And you can always reply and tell us what else you'd like to see us doing. And with that, I will say thank you to all and close us out.
Thanks, everybody.